Hi everyone and welcome to this video featuring cottagecore inspired DIYs. As the name suggests, cottagecore is an aesthetic that's based on nature, wildlife, peace, and basically enjoying a simple, cozy life. I first came across this on TikTok, but soon realized that elements of cottagecore have always been part of things I love. Stuff like Animal Crossing, Studio Ghibli, crafting, sewing, and cooking all have strong cottagecore vibes. So in this video, we're going to make some pressed flowers, paint a watercolor hydrangea, and build a tiny fairy dollhouse. By the way, all the jewelry I'm wearing is from Les Nereides, who kindly let me pick out some samples. This brand has the cutest whimsical themes that go perfectly with cottagecore style. So now let's get started with the first DIY, which is an incredibly easy way to make dried flowers. You simply need baking paper, a heavy book, and some flowers, and I picked these myself. If you're using wildflowers, then be sure to check them for insects first, because I found quite a few bugs hiding between the leaves. Start by trimming off the stems so you can lay the petals down flat. This book was the thickest one I could find, but for best results, I'd recommend using something even heavier. A textbook or encyclopedia would be ideal. Fold the baking paper in half and start placing your plants in a flat layer on top. You should definitely press more flowers than you think you need, because they often dry into unpredictable shapes. Then carefully close the book and add a few more heavy things on top. Check back after a few days and your flowers should be nice and flat. You might notice that some of them look better than others when pressed. I found that smaller petals were harder to get right because they tend to shrink and disappear. Large flat petals or flowers with a lot of contrast look best, such as this ox-eye daisy. The clover also turned out well. You can use these as a starting point for all kinds of DIYs. Resin is a popular method for preserving dried flowers. I tried making a few necklace pendants, but unfortunately they didn't turn out very well because I kept getting air bubbles inside. I'm a total beginner with craft resin, so if you know how to get bubbles out of UV resin, then please tell me down below. The next DIY is how to paint these impressive looking hydrangeas. These are my favorite types of flowers in Animal Crossing, and my garden is blooming with them right now. Start by sketching a few circles or tracing a round object onto the paper. I'm going with 3, but you can do as many as you want. Try to make these slightly different sizes, which looks more realistic. I'm also excited to test out this glitter watercolor palette by Paul Rubens, which I saw on TikTok. However, I'm not sure these contain enough colors, so I'm going to be painting the main image using my usual half-pan watercolor set. I'm going to use a single brush with a thin pointy tip. I also recommend keeping a piece of tissue nearby, just in case you have to remove any colors that don't look right. Start by painting a single blossom using 4 diamond shapes and a tiny dot in the center. Then continue until you fill up the circle. I'm also using different amounts of water here, so the flowers look slightly lighter or darker. Now repeat the process for the other 2. This time, I'm starting with a purple and then gradually mixing in some paint from the first one so there's a nice gradient effect. For the third one, I'm starting with an inky blue and then adding both purple and pink so it brings everything together. The more you paint, the more you'll notice your style loosening up, which is a good thing. The smaller blossoms don't have to look perfect, and the petals can be slightly irregular or run into each other. Try to make the blossoms in the center of the ball slightly larger than the ones near the edge. I tried out the glitter watercolor here, and it's more of a translucent pearly wash. It does add quite a nice effect, but I think this will look better at the end, so I'll save this up for later. For the next part, you have to be a bit brave and mix up a very dark shade. Then go back in with this and fill in the gaps between the flowers. You want to focus on the lower third of each ball so it creates an illusion of volume. Don't worry about covering up some of the flowers that you've already painted. If you start losing contrast, then go over the petals using an even darker shade to make them stand out. The main part of this step is to create an overall sense of texture and make each ball look three-dimensional. It's also a lot of fun, and you can play around with the colors and layers without worrying about the tiny details. Now use a mossy green to add some leaves. Hydrangea leaves are very easy to paint because they look almost like cartoon leaves. They have this typical round curvy shape and a single pointed tip. Lastly, I just added some more pearly highlights and my painting is done. To be honest, this one turned out much better than I expected, and it's relatively straightforward to follow. Even if you mess up once, just try again and you'll notice an improvement every time. For the final DIY, we'll be making this miniature fairy house. If you haven't tried making dollhouse DIYs yet, then you have to check out my playlist down below. These are so incredibly cottagecore, and there are endless numbers of kits that you can buy online. I think these are the best projects to pass time with if you have to spend a lot of time indoors. For instance, if you're stuck in lockdown or quarantine. This design is one of the simpler ones, but it also comes with lights, music, and it even spins on its own. Like most dollhouse kits, everything is carefully packaged and labeled. The instructions are in English, and I strongly recommend following them closely. I find that making dollhouses is almost like meditation, so try putting on some relaxing music and do each step slowly and mindfully. If you try to rush the process without looking at the diagrams, then it's most likely going to end in frustration. First, you have to cut out some paper textures and stick these to your wall pieces. Normal PVA craft glue works best for these, and you can use a paintbrush to avoid getting it on your fingers. Tweezers are also very useful for tiny details, such as adding the window frames or holding pieces in place until they dry. You even get a small piece of sandpaper to create a slanted angle so the roof pieces can fit together perfectly. Assembling the house doesn't actually take very long. The most time-consuming parts of this kit involve adding all the furniture, decorations, and plants. But since this is a cottagecore video, that's exactly what should make it most enjoyable. These dollhouses come with LED lights that look amazing when connected, but they can be a bit fiddly to complete. So if you're a complete beginner, then feel free to leave out the electrical parts. Glue the house in place and start adding all the decorations. This potted plant is made from a single bead, which I think is pretty incredible. There's so much attention to detail in these kits, and it makes you realize that even the tiniest bit of leftover craft supplies can be turned into miniature objects. You also get 2 little bunnies to live in here. And now this miniature cottage is done. The finished piece can be covered with fairy lights and placed inside a glass dome. It also plays music and spins on its own, which makes this tiny world inside come alive. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and feel free to follow me on TikTok and Instagram under my username Macaroon. I'm Joanna, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!